Hey, welcome back. It's Louisa Munson from Feel Good Astrology, and this is the Feel Good Astrology Show, a daily show where I say daily. It's Monday to Thursday, and then there's a big one on the Sunday. But anyway, today's show, I want to have a look at the coronation chart of Bonnie King Charlie the Third, Charles the Third, however you want to have a look at it. I was actually hoping that by the time I went live with this, that I'd have recorded something a little bit more substantial in terms of Queen Elizabeth, her birth chart, and her coronation chart, and then Charles's birth chart and his coronation chart, because there's a lot of information captured within that. I've got everything all ready to record, and I've had a few, let me say, Mercury retrograde style cock ups. I think cock up is probably the right word, where things went completely bonkers on this computer. But hey, I'm here and I'm recording, so that's great. Before I get started, as you know, I like to look at the forecast for the next day. And also pick a card for you to see how things are going. But, you know, before I do that, let's just welcome a few people in. So I can see that I've got people watching. Who knows where you are at the moment? I've got no idea. So let's see who's watching. Oh, I've got Owen Lloyd Martin from up north in Portugal saying a big hi. Hello, my friend. Yeah. And I've got this, I had this lovely conversation with a fellow astrologer, Alexandra Jowett, who you might know from the channel Jupiter Returns, which I absolutely recommend you check out. She's fantastic. And so I had a conversation with Alexandra and also another astrologer about the chart of the coronation, you know, to see what we think might happen, or how it seems a good astrological date. To be fair, all we could really agree on was, yes, it's a strong date, but a strong date for what exactly? That's where it gets a little bit confusing. I can see we've got Sarah Taylor also from the north of Portugal joining us with a hello. And I love this where things go slightly wonky, you know, in terms of the icons or the emojis that we might use. So it says hand pink waving. So I love that. And we've also got Gaining Wisdom. Not sure if it's okay to actually say what your real name is, because you have got a pseudonym, but hey, Gaining Wisdom from the US. I hope you're doing better. Yeah, I am actually doing better. My voice is coming back now. And I haven't coughed half as much as I did a few nights ago. So that's fantastic. Thank you for that. So anyway, let's bring on the forecast for tomorrow, and then we'll focus more on Charles III and the coronation. I'd also like to know what your views are of the monarchy as well, and also talk about the whole idea of, I don't know if you've heard it, and I've only got this kind of second hand from people in the UK, but apparently in the schools there, they're preparing children to be able to recite some kind of pledge of allegiance to him. That sends a few spidey feelings going on. You know, I've got my spidey senses are tingling a little bit there, because we know these ceremonies are great big spells, you know. I mean, you know, when you get people together to do something, essentially, you know, all big ceremony is like a spell. You know, a spell is cast. There is this moment in time and space where everyone's in agreement and everyone is buying into something. It seems rather interesting that, you know, in terms of this coronation, that they are choosing to engage children, people, everyone at home, almost like a giant coronation karaoke, where they get the sort of like pledge of allegiance up on the screen or something, so people can, you know, like their Girl Guides and the Scouts, you know, I promise to do my best to do my duty to God, or whatever that was that I engaged in, you know, all that that time ago. So thank you, Stuart. Yeah, I will refer to you as Stuart in future. And Sarah has lost me. I'm here, I promise. I hope I'm still here. Who knows? Well, who knows? There's Mercury retrograde, and like I said, there have been some interesting times for me today on this computer. Anyway, let's have a look at the forecast for tomorrow, and then we'll dive right into the whole idea of this forecast, you know, for the coronation. So let's bring up this update. Hey, so for the 3rd of May then, oh, this is quite a different day to yesterday. There's a lot more strong feelings going on. In particular, we're feeling a little bit insecure. We're being reminded it's almost like salt is being rubbed in our wounds somewhat. And there's also this feeling of defiance, very much like if you try and control me, just watch what's going to happen. And also, I think people are very over emotional in terms of, when they are feeling triggered, they could just walk off on their own and sort themselves out. But in actual fact, it's almost, I guess the word I'm looking for is infantile. We are very much like toddlers at the moment. We're being triggered. And the response that we're having, with this moon in a square to Mars is slightly that of a tantrum. We've also got an interesting little micro connection between Saturn and Mars as well, which is pretty stressful. And that to me is also saying that, these contretemps are likely to come up because of some kind of outside authority that's kind of saying this is what you need to do. And there's the rebel in us and also the belligerent toddler and ever hopeful toddler in us kind of fighting back. So keep your cool on the 3rd of May and let's see what we've got for tomorrow. Let's see what tomorrow brings. So, yeah, there you go. Let's not try it and be like a toddler. I've picked out a card for tomorrow, and here's the one that seemed to jump out at me. And that is the Four of Wands, which is from the Mythic Tarot, which is my absolute tarot deck of choice. The Four of Cards, I really like it because it's a feeling that kind of everything is okay. It doesn't actually matter what's going on. It doesn't actually matter if like where we are in a project, we just kind of feel a little bit satisfied. It feels like things are okay. So yeah, it's that feeling that you've laid some foundations and things are okay. You can see that there are dreams off in the distance. He's dreaming about his trip and everything. And yes, there could be some choppy waters, but actually as you look into the background of that card, it looks like it's going to be okay. So I think it's also, not just about feeling like everything's going to be okay, but it's also a little bit about seeing beyond the barriers that you think exist. So how about that? So let me bring a little bit of information on then in terms of the coronation. So this is the birth chart of His Royal Highness, as as some people call him. So now, when you're looking at a birth chart, we always pay a bit of attention to the ascendant, and his is in the sign of Leo. Now, the ascendant describes the sort of who the ruler is, like which planet is the most important planet. And in King Charles's chart, it would be the sun. The sun is the ruler. And his son, in fact, he's got a lot of planets here in the 4th house, which to me is a real sort of indicator that he's not really somebody that wants to be in the limelight particularly, though he's got his moon right at the top of the chart. Now, it's interesting. A lot of people who are public figures, I've noticed in particular, like actresses and actors and musicians and stuff, in particular people whose public life seems to just be really well known, like you can't keep any secrets. It all comes out eventually. And they tend to have this moon in the 10th house. It's very difficult to keep things hidden when you've got that moon in the 10th house. So that's definitely a tension for him. Now, I've got these little lines on. Now, that's actually really to show where the retrogrades are, the Mercury retrogrades. In terms of this year. And in fact, what I've just done is put on the details of the coronation around the outside. So these represent the planetary positions of where everything is on the 6th. Now, what's interesting to me, in fact, we can ignore this. This is where the retrograde is going to be in August, and this is where it is at the end of the year and also at the beginning of this year. But this is where we are right now in terms of, like, here's the sun, because we're right in the middle of Taurus season. And last week in this position here, Mercury started to move backwards. you can just see that there's Mercury. See that little, what looks like a person with horns with a little R to his bottom left-hand side. That's Mercury, and Mercury's moving in this direction. And around the 14th or 15th, he's going to change direction and start moving forwards again until the next retrograde in August, which is down, by which time Mercury will be down here. Now, these red dots are showing where the next eclipse is. And here's why a lot of people think that this coronation is an interesting one, because we've got a full moon the day before the coronation. And so the sun is here, because it's not quite here. It's just here. The day before. This is where it is on the day of the coronation, but this is where it is the day before, on the day of the full moon lunar penumbral eclipse. And this is where the moon is going to be at the time of the eclipse. So the moon is highlighting his fourth house, all things private. And the sun is kind of trying to get him to be very public. It's creating quite a pressure for him. Now, what interests me in particular is in Prince Charles's, or King Charles's, birth chart, his North Node, which is very much about his karma in life, and also the things that he's going to struggle with in this life, is at almost 5 degrees in the sign of Taurus. At the time of his coronation, the North Node is right slap bang over his North Node. So this is a real indication that this is the time of the cycle to continue, that the persona, and I'm saying that very deliberately, the persona and the life that we know of King Charles III is almost changing course or going into a new phase at this time when the North Node connects with the North Node. Now, in opposition to the North Node, we always have the South Node. Now, it's not actually pictured here on this chart, but it's essentially here. So at the time and date of his birth, the South Node was at 5 degrees pretty much, and his birth Mercury was in a conjunction with it. Now, the South Node shows what we're coming from. It shows the karma of, like where we may have completed on something in a previous life, if you believe in past lives. It also shows a part of our chart where things seem to be a bit easier, where we seem to have a handle on it. And he's got Mercury there, almost like he's come in with extra knowledge, like he's come in knowing where he came from and having some of these answers. Wouldn't it be great if we were born with this like handbook? You know how every car has a manual, or everything, I was going to swear then, everything that you get in your home, every appliance, everything has its own little manual telling you how it works. And we just don't know that for ourselves. We have no idea other than what we're told by experts. But, where do they get that information from, and who paid for that information, more importantly? So like, we don't really come in with this handbook of where we are, what we're doing, and we have to kind of learn it experientially. What it feels like to me with King Charles III is that he came in with all this information about what he was here to do, how he was meant to be, where he's come from. Feels like there's a lot of knowing there. Possibly a lot of old secrets and stuff. The fourth house, interestingly, is also one of the psychic houses, I would say, as is the 8th and the 12th. They are houses where secrets are kept in particular. Now, in the birth chart, we often look at the moon as representing the mother, and sometimes Ceres as well. I really like Ceres as she's like goddess she's like Mother Earth or Demeter. She is a very, very strong. So, I mean, some astrologers would fight me on this and say that the moon is the dad and the sun is the mum. I tend to reverse that, just because of the people I've chatted with and in my experience of working. I would say that the moon tends to represent the mum a lot more. It's interesting that his moon is in such a prominent position in the 10th house, showing a very strong mum, a very sort of professional mum, and one who was in quite an interesting position, given that the moon is at 0 degrees in the sign of Taurus. Now, if we look at Ceres to represent the mum, it is also in a conjunction with Pluto, which is really, really strong. And it's in the first house, which affects his personality and his persona and his identity. So again, I would say this is definitely his chart, because, you know, his mum is like one of the most powerful women on the planet. And it definitely affects his identity. Nobody can see him outside of that particular role. So some really big themes going on. And at the time of the coronation, yes, the south node is down here, the north node is up here. Mercury retrograde is in opposition to his Mercury, which again is pretty big. I don't think it's, to me, it feels like there are secrets. Are secrets going to be revealed? Is it going to be a time of things collapsing? And, you know, I don't necessarily think that the ceremony won't necessarily take place, but I think it's almost like once that ceremony has taken place, a whole bunch of other stuff is about to collapse, emerge, re-emerge. It just feels like there is something, something really fated and very much fated about his life and possibly the history of the royals that is going to come forwards. Now, other things that strike me as kind of interesting is at the time that this is going on, we've also got Pluto in an exact square to his moon. And now that's really not comfortable. In fact, that's really deeply uncomfortable. And his Pluto is in a very dutiful place at the 6th house, which is very much about work and duty and also the physical health. You know, it's a very, very serious time for him and probably a time that's going to really age him. And this Pluto is heading up closer and closer to his descendant. It's not going to be there for a long time, not for another 2 or 3 years, but it's definitely kind of heading towards this angle, which is pretty big. These are epic times for him. And yes, his moon is at 0 degrees in the sign of Taurus. Now, interestingly, give it 10 days after his coronation, Jupiter is going to be exactly over his moon at 0 degrees. And Mars, by the 21st, this is off the top of my head now, is going to be at 0 degrees in the sign of Leo. And by the 22nd, 23rd, we've got this huge opposition between Mars, Pluto, and Jupiter. In fact, it's not an opposition, it's a T-square. So we've got a planet here, there, and here, right over King Charles III's moon in his 10th house, in his very public-facing position. This doesn't, I don't think this really bodes well, to be honest. To me, it looks like a whole bunch of things are triggering, which will bring up a lot of patterns to do with his mother, given that the moon can represent the mom. And, you know, when I look at the mom and, you know, think, well, she's represented by the sign of Taurus, you know, right on this cusp, it's very interesting. And she shows up here as well. Just feels very significant. And actually, when you do see, when I do record something in much greater detail about the link between him and his mother's chart, you'll see that there's a lot going on here between Leo and Taurus. In fact, I would say the House of Windsor is all about these fixed signs of Taurus and Aquarius, and also, Taurus and Scorpio and Leo and Aquarius. It's all pretty big. Now, we also have to add in the fact that Prince Charles, or King Charles III, also was born within 2 weeks of a total solar eclipse. And his coronation is taking place 2 weeks after a total solar eclipse. In fact, the day after the penumbral lunar eclipse, which kind of closes it off. This is also pretty significant. You know, his coronation is taking place at a time that his birth chart has a coding for. So that seems a little bit kind of interesting. Yeah. So in 1948, literally 13 days before he was born, there's the total solar eclipse. And that would have occurred at 8 degrees in the sign of Scorpio, because I've looked it up already. And so you'd have had the moon and the sun at 8 degrees in the sign of Scorpio, in a conjunction with his south node, That's fascinating. And also in a conjunction with Mercury. So it's really kind of interesting that at the time of his coronation, there's a lunar eclipse in opposition to the eclipse that he was born under. There's a lot of big things going on. Anyway, let's just have a look at the whole idea of it being a mind spell. So this is actually, it does look like I've just gone back to his chart because the ascendant is in the sign of Leo, but this is actually the chart for the actual coronation itself. Now, here's the big question, and that is, when does a coronation actually happen? I think the ceremony starts at 11, and that's just a procession like going towards Westminster. And I've looked on the internet, and at the time when I was looking up the chart details, I couldn't get a closer time as to the moment where the crown goes on his head, or when he says whatever it is he says. A bit like when you get married. When do you actually get married? Is it at the start of the ceremony? Is it when you say I do? Is it when the ring goes on the finger? Or is it when you kiss the bride or the groom or whoever? There are lots of different things that we can talk about with there, but I'm taking it as 11 a.m., which is when the whole thing starts to unfold. And yes, the ascendant is in the sign of Leo. Leo is the star sign associated with the king, and also with royalty in general, and being the best, being the cream of the crop, so to speak. We've also got, like, the moon is at 24 degrees in the sign of Scorpio. King Charles III, his sun is at 22 degrees in the sign of Scorpio. So the moon is right on his sun, which is kind of interesting. Like I said, the sun is in opposition to his sun. So it's like there's a lot of things triggering in his chart to show a fundamental change. But at the time, this is where I think we need to be careful, is the idea of, is this a bit of a spell? And I'd love your thoughts on this. Do you think if you're pledging allegiance to somebody, if you're saying a particular words of a ceremony at the same time as something taking place, do you think it's a spell? Do you think it's part of something that's helpful? I guess it doesn't matter how you judge it, but can you see that you might be actually, as I see this chart, this is about the coronation, and it's interesting, isn't it, that there's a coronation almost ending the time of the coronavirus, the whole like spell of the coronavirus, the whole period of time that we've had where it appears that the world has gone into a bit of chaos. And then, as the CDC is announcing the end of it, as things are really winding down all around the world now, that there is the coronation. I think there's some interesting little parallels there from the name in its own right. But anyway, the sign of Leo is about sovereignty. So this could be very much about, a king coming into his rightful place, but it could be about us coming into our rightful place and space. At the time of the eclipses, there is this huge karmic load, and it is a chance for the whole of humanity to work towards something. There tends to be a lot more earth changes around that time and big events taking place. In my May forecast, I have alluded to the fact that there are some really big energies, and in particular around the 20th to 23rd, when there's a lot of things at 0 degrees here, here, in Cancer, and in also Gemini as well. There's a lot of energy at 0 degrees. There's a new start. There is the feeling of a change. And we are in the real sort of precursor to it. I do think there's going to be something really quite dynamic that takes place. And to me, it feels like it all starts to come into clear and sharp focus after the coronation of King Charles. Now, do I think that this is a strong chart? Yes, I do. Obviously it's got the Leo thing. It's happening after a full moon. I think tensions will be raised, and it is an eclipse. It also fits in with his chart perfectly, which was all about the eclipse. So I can see why they've chosen that particular date. However, when I look at all of these big old squares, the square energy between all the planets, there's not much ease. To me, it looks like there's a lot of crankiness. There's a lot of stuff to discover. Also, it's covering the fixed signs, and the fixed signs are very much about where things have been rigid. Now, in my more full expose of the coronation, and also looking at Queen Elizabeth's coronation, and she was there for a really long time, obviously, there were lots of beautiful trines. So these lovely long blue lines of 120 degrees, signifying where things are easy. Her coronation just had lots of that going on in it, and I can show you in the bigger one. But this just looks to me like things are not very stable. Last thing that I want to comment then is like Mercury's retrograde. Most astrologers would recommend that if you're going to engage in any kind of binding agreement where there's a contract or expected outcomes, that you wouldn't do it at the time of Mercury retrograde, unless you've got a Mercury retrograde pattern in your own chart, which King Charles doesn't. Mercury retrograde shows changing thoughts and maybe the need for things to be reevaluated. So it seems very strange that just after a full moon, after Mercury retrograde, and just at the tail end of the eclipse season, they would consider putting on a coronation. Also, the moon will have been thrown into the waning phase, which is about things getting smaller, things closing down. Surely, if you were going to have a triumphant message about the monarchy, you would want it through a waxing phase, which is when all the avid moon-based gardeners and people that really know their stuff, that's when they're sowing their seeds and putting their plants in. It's during the waxing phase where things are growing. Or why wouldn't you just wait another month, and find a better date when there is not this huge testing kind of square energy. I mean, you can see it all coming in. It's like right angles. And this is what I'm talking about. By the 20th, 21st, 23rd of this month, May 2023, there's this very sharp right angle forming between Pluto, about transformation, corruption, secrets, ultimate power, and deception, like really nasty old violence. Mars in opposition. Mars is the other sign of violence and male things, no disrespect to guys, but things that go a little bit awry. And then Jupiter, the other planet, which expands things and makes things, inflames situations, makes them go huge. So, we have got this potential between Pluto and Mars in opposition, set off by Jupiter saying, come on then, let's bring it on. Just after the event of the coronation, that just seems a bit dodgy to me. Add in the fact also that when this goes off, all of this comes into play with the North Node and then the South Node down here. Also, the fact that this is taking place with the moon in the sign of Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto and Mars, and neither of them are particularly happy. This doesn't seem to bode well. It's not a fuzzy message of monarchy is great. This is a message that something is likely to change and collapse, and maybe it needs to. So there you go. I'm really not mincing my words here. I just don't think it's a very good date. It's an interesting date. It definitely matches in with his chart, but it almost feels like it's set up to fail. I am going to record more and also put in the short interview that I did with my astrologer friend. She's got some great theories as well, in terms, she links it into Saturn in Pisces as well as the death of Wu. So look out for that when I release it, hopefully in the next couple of days or two. Got a couple more comments coming in. So somebody has said, Monique Noble astrology of the coronation. Okay, thanks. If you want another view of it, I think Monique Noble astrology might also be somewhere where you can go. Sarah Taylor then, everything we were asked to repeat that we did not come up with ourselves is a spell. Yes, I agree 100%. And it almost seems like it's being coordinated to fail. That's, yeah, exactly. I feel you 100% there. Thank you so much, Sarah. So anyway, on that, I'm going to love you and leave you. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about Pluto retrograde and what kind of impact they may well have on us. If, for instance, like how we can see control, how we can interact with control, and what the potentials are during that time. So anyway, if that sounds like something that might interest you, join me tomorrow at 6 p.m. That's Portugal and London time. I don't know what time it is in other time zones, but I hope to see you again real soon. Lots of love. Take care and see you soon. Bye for now.